Okay, so hi everybody, and welcome back to Talking Therapy with me, Devraj. And today I'm very excited to have another therapist on the program from the UK, from Hove, in the south of the UK. His name is Laine. Leslie, thank you very much for coming on this podcast. And perhaps you'd like, yeah, perhaps you'd like to just introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your journey, perhaps, to becoming a therapist. Was it always in your sort of childhood mind, or whatever you feel to share?
No, definitely not in my childhood mind. No, it was probably in my mind when I got to about 21, but I didn't really do anything about it until I was around 40. When I went into, I was very attracted to dreams and working with dreams, so I went into Jungian analysis. And that was, that was 15 years ago, and I finished my therapy last year. So I had a very long Jungian analysis with a few different analysts, and yeah, I thought that's what I wanted to do, that I wanted to become a Jungian analyst. So I did start training in that, but you know, it became quite clear to me as I progressed in my training that what I'd read, I'd read from Jung, and what was sort of available out there in terms of training was different, if you see what I mean. So it was a very strange world, which I decided that I didn't really want anything to do with in the end. And I'd already started doing other trainings and other things. So I had basically 4 years of Jungian analytical training, and really I think the most valuable aspect of that was having analysis twice a week. Your training analysis, you know, where you get to, you know, talk about yourself, analyze your dreams, and, you know, talk a bit of theory with your analyst. You know, it's all geared towards training, but that was very valuable. And then I got into family constellations first of all, and I actually found that was very body oriented, strangely enough, you know, in that in a family constellation, when you're a representative for somebody's system, you know, a historical figure, either alive or dead, you know, you would have body feelings and emotions related to that person. So that was a very embodied way of working, and that really opened my eyes a little bit. And then I came across Nick Totten's work, embodied relational therapy. So I did a diploma and then an advanced diploma in that, and then I was doing lots of other things like group analysis. I was really sort of mixing it up, and then finally I discovered biodynamic craniosacral therapy, which for me really was the icing on the cake, you know. So really all these strands inform my work. So, you know, I know various Reichian techniques for helping to sort of disengage, you know, muscle armor, body armor, stuff like that, breathing techniques, a few things like that. And, you know, so I've got lots of things that I can do. I mean, of course, the main thing is sitting with the client, you know, and being in that space with them, and being as present as you can, you know. So and actually through my work with craniosacral therapy, it's sort of becoming more and more that I'm first of all a craniosacral therapist who also can do talking therapy and analyze your dreams, so that's kind of where I'm heading at the moment.
Thank you. It's interesting what you mentioned there towards the end about, a big part of therapy really is not so much, we tend to, or the society we have tends to, I think, predispose people to focus on the techniques. I'm going to do this kind of therapy or that kind of therapy, or
you can have something done to you, basically.
Yes. Well, that's that. I guess there's various strands of that, but I hear it a lot in clients or people who are just interacting with me from the work I create, and often what is missing a little bit is that element of, okay, you're going to be with someone who's going to be really present with you.
Yes.
Exactly. And slowly over time, perhaps if you're working one-to-one, establish some kind of bond of trust where you begin to feel safe to unravel deeper layers of your psyche, even just on a verbal level or whatever. And that is that your experience of therapeutic work, being a therapist yourself, that this element of presence is often kind of understated in a sense?
Oh, I think it's completely understated, because but people are sort of uneducated really about therapy. They think that what therapy is all about is you have a treatment. It's some kind of treatment. It's something that's done to you, and you've always got to, with those kind of clients anyway, you've always got to coax them into it. Coax them into the idea that it's it's being present together and being with the creative flow that emanates from that togetherness, really, and the things that come up through relationship, which is often, the edges of the client's issues, the things that come up.
Yeah. No, it's really something. I was reading something about sometime about a year ago, and it was written by some psychotherapist in the States who was complaining that they've got this thing called the Veterans Association over there, or the Veterans something, which is like for people who've been in the army, who've experienced some level of trauma in war or conflict. Right. And then they were kind of dropping psychotherapy out of it or something like that. I don't know the whole details, but replacing it with these services which the state was kind of saying these are gold standard services, and it was like very kind of mechanistic, and you have the sense, or if I was a vet, I'd have the sense like I was getting, dealing with trauma was like taking my car to be repaired or something like that.
Yes,
like,
yeah, that's a lot. That's kind of when people first get into the idea that they've got trauma and they want to do something about it. It's like, how long is it going to take? How many sessions? Like 2, 5, and I'm thinking, well, has been known to happen, but I've never experienced someone overcome their traumas in a couple of sessions. I've seen people gain great insight into why they are where they are at this point in their life, but I've never known anyone to suddenly go, I'm cured, after a couple of sessions.
Mm-hmm.
So
it is. I think it's just tricky for psychotherapy in a sense to fit into the modern world, because there's a kind of, I don't know, a need to, I can understand that people want to have some process quantified in some way. That's not to me an irrational or need or coming out of a traumatic mind necessarily. And yet it is very difficult to quantify a good therapeutic approach. It's just not very easy. And what seems to have happened, particularly in the States, which can lead a little bit in the West, is just very marginalizing process work that's not easily quantifiable. Right. Placing it with something that's a bit more formulaic, some of the CBT offshoots, which are not necessarily bad things at all, great, but there's been this marginalization of really somewhere, or the difficulty of quantifying, just being present with someone and forming a proper healing relationship.
Yes.
It's yeah, something like that anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, biodynamic craniosacral therapy, craniosacral therapy started out as a sort of biomechanical sort of thing where where you would exert pressure here and you'd have an effect. But then that kind of changed somewhat with sort of modern people like Franklin Sills, who I trained with, where there was no mechanical input from your hands, so you basically just hold someone, in various holds, and you invite presence, and you try and be as present as possible, and that presence is what gets the body moving, gets what we call the sort of fluid tide of the body starting to move just with presence, just with being deeply present,
and with physical contact, presumably.
Yes, with physical contact. Yeah, I feel it's something that's so overlooked, in our whole Western history, is presence, that just being present and seeing what comes from that presence and from your non-judgmental attention, and for you not willing any outcome at all, just being with what is there.
It's a very kind of meditative approach in many ways.
It is. It is, yes, it is definitely. But it's sort of like something else because you're doing it together with someone else. It's kind of like a co-meditation, where in some ways helping each other.
Yeah. It's interesting working with the body. I think that almost a goal I found is for someone to be able to kind of feel perhaps an area of their body and remain with that feeling, without kind of going off somewhere else. To have that kind of presence of mind and comfort with the sensation of the body, that you can remain with that sensation of the body. I had someone on an online course a year or two ago, and they were kind of skeptical most of the whole way through. And I think then the last part of this course was using a meditative practice like that. Right. And they just found this suddenly totally transformational at the end of the course.
Right. Yeah.
I can't remember all the details, but like it was that is a kind of goal in a sense of some of these body techniques, but we no longer have to kind of dissociate, or even it's really unconsciously motivated, so it's not all driven and most of the dissociation anyway, but like there's not that need there anymore, and you can simply stay with yourself with something.
Yes, and bringing attention to it presumably changes it, makes it move, or makes it express itself.
Yeah, there's like a journey that starts in the
Yes.
sensational world.
Yes.
I think there's a thing called somatic experiencing, which was set up by a guy called Peter Levine, who was formerly a bioenergetic or Reichian therapist.
Yeah.
And he does something like this. I think it's a very gentle way forward or something like that. But yeah, I mean, this thing with like, what seems to be happening a lot is because, the last couple of years, a lot of people have been in much less physical contact and less close contact with COVID and regulations and restrictions, and protective measures. It's like, I don't know, it's always been a question for me. Okay, how much, it's almost like a shortcut in therapy somewhere to give physical contact, in a sense, because it just seems to be so reassuring to some. I read once or heard someone chat once about, because we're fundamentally mammals, mammals thrive on physical contact. And so there's almost this immense kind of shortcut in therapy towards just giving people physical contact, where we'll kind of nourish them and relax them, certainly if they're seeking release from stress or something. And then there's kind of, in my mind, there's also deeper questions about, okay, but are we constrained by that? Is it an absolute kind of given of the system that you must have physical contact, or can you be present in your body without so much physical contact? It's like one of those questions my questioning mind comes up with, and I don't really know the answer to.
No, I don't. I don't know the answer, but I know some people thrive upon this verbal channel, which of course is the body as well. You can feel it vibrating through there. And there's something that I believe it was Harry Sullivan, a British, I think he's British psychoanalyst. No, I think he is British psychoanalyst, who said that we call things unconscious most of the time when they're merely unformulated. So to formulate them, you need to sort of express them in the manner of communicative speech to somebody, and then the act of communicating them makes them conscious experiences. So they're just sort of unformulated experiences. And I think some of the work has to be verbal, which is why at the beginning of a craniosacral session we may talk for 10-20 minutes about what's been happening, depending on the client, and normally, in a lot of the time anyway, in craniosacral therapy, it's quite silent. You're just holding somebody.
Yeah, I mean, I often find it's just like in starting to kind of articulate what's happening in my life to a friend, as a narrative, it's like new things come up. I'm not actually, I didn't realize I was going to say that or something, and new insights, or, like you say, new formulations, a new way of putting something down that's kind of actually accurate, but you weren't.
Yes.
And
like if you tell somebody a dream, if you tell somebody a dream and you had no idea what it means, and then in the telling of it, you suddenly realize, oh, that's what it means. I've got it now, So just by the act of telling it, you're sort of formulating it,
Yeah.
And also, being heard is a physical, bodily phenomena. If I'm received by somebody, I'm sort of putting it out there, and I'm received, and I can see that this other person is, in some ways affected and maybe even moved by what I'm saying. It has an incredible effect on the body. And of course, one of the most joyous in therapy, at least anyway, bodily symptoms is the tear, because they can release emotions, of course, so and that's a lot of the time facilitated by talking.
Yeah, and having someone listen to you.
Yeah,
it's reminding me of something, because for a while I was tuning into some, I think, American psychotherapists, kind of big name guys in America, and they were having quite a crusade about, because what's coming, like I say, America's always a little bit ahead often in these things, medical or psychological practices, is a phone apps which will do counseling.
Yes, I know.
Everyone was super up in arms about these, but I was kind of a little bit like, well, that's interesting. Is there anything that a phone app could do that a human being can't, for example? And one therapist was kind of in this dialogue, like, a phone app cannot listen. And I thought, well, that's true. A phone app cannot listen. However, if I'm being strictly, really, just really try to be objective. It's not that someone needs to be listened to, it needs that they need to believe that they're being listened to. It's an internal process. And can a phone app mimic that? And then I kind of dropped this whole thing and was not interested. And then I was listening to an AI researcher, a very interesting chap, Lex Friedman, Russian guy, who's very heart-centered as well. He's a very heartful chap. And he was saying that the potential in counseling apps is immense, that they could lead human beings on a very deep kind of journey of self-exploration, because I guess at least for the first generation of humans that use them, they can mimic listening so well, and they don't get tired, and you can just kind of chat to them whenever, you know. And on one level it sounds kind of dystopian, like quite extreme, and on another it's kind of interesting because
it is,
because maybe humans could go on some deep sort of heart-centered journey with an app that it would be easier to trust than another human being, and easier to get access to, and probably quite a bit cheaper, I guess, in the long run as well, you know. So I don't know, it's just I just found that very interesting, the perspective.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm just trying to think about that. I'm thinking about, you know, there's no element of risk then, you know, with an app. You know, you're not faced with, you know, a flawed human being, which everybody is. You know, you're faced with, you know, a perfect app who's going to have your, you know, have programmed into it all your best interests. You know? So I'm wondering about that prospect of actually taking a risk, whether, you know, whether that is what life is about, really, taking some kind of risk. Otherwise you know, you could just be behind all your muscle armor and everything will be fine, you know. And so you might be sort of enshrouded with your app, you know, because your app understands you, and, you know, it's quite insular, isn't it? You know.
Well, we don't know. We don't. I think the thing is, you don't know. There was
you don't yet know, no, but it's a very interesting experiment. Yeah.
We don't know where it would go. It's kind of, but it was interesting to hear this chap who's an AI researcher at MIT, and he was saying this, and I thought, yeah, you know, he's gone a bit further down that road than I had, and like, actually, yeah, what would happen? And of course, there was a movie, I mean, nearly a decade ago, with Joaquin Phoenix, this kind of American actor, where in fact, a load of people became in a relationship with a computer program, basically, which was kind of, they were responding and listening to him, which was learning from all of these things, and all these guys were falling in love with this computer program, essentially. I mean, it was kind of interesting movie, really.
Yeah, I think I saw that. Yeah. So, you know, your therapist will be replaced by an app. You know, we'll all be out of jobs.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I also thought that maybe after one generation, then you know, people will get bored of talking to apps and want to talk to humans again or something, or it won't. But the app will seem like it's not real and not listening. It's just that because an app can mimic listening, and we're so used to human listening. So I mean, who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
All these things, but it's
so we've had the CD, but now we're going back to vinyl. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, I guess it is because we've kind of, you know, as I see it, come into such a kind of disembodied age in the West as well, you know, where I don't know how you measure these things, but people have just become so kind of thinking about everything, you know, and the technology and whatever. It's like, will there be a renaissance of kind of feeling the body and wanting to get back in the body, you know? We seem to go so far in one direction, you know. It's like,
I think I mean, that book by the neuroscientist, what's his name? The Body Keeps the Score. I mean, that's bestseller for quite a long time. And you know, I know. I mean, I've seen hundreds of people who are into it and read it, and, you know, I mean, that's a big thing, you know. But it, you know, but it's actually, I mean, I don't know what will happen, because it's produced this huge growth industry of the trauma industry, hasn't it? You know, there's a huge industry now around trauma, and you know, people are being basically sold things, you know, to overcome their trauma, and that seems to, for a lot of people, to be the point of their life, is to, you know, overcome trauma, you know, which can be anything from not having been listened to full-blown physical abuse, you know.
Yeah. I mean, it's become almost a huge industry, certainly, and it's kind of, I don't know, it's got this kind of I mean, I think it's good because it does bring people into awareness, and I guess one of the things with trauma in the Western society is that, you know, it's still considered pretty much a pejorative to like say, oh, I've been traumatized. Like that's like you're almost adding insult to injury, you know, that you're taking your self-image down another notch by saying something like that. Well, of course, I mean, to me, I mean, everyone's been subjected to quite a reasonable level of trauma, pretty much, and so. And one of the things really is not so much for traumatic events that have happened, though, of course, when we get interested in this scene, we focus on those and trying to remember and whatever. But, you know, the fact that we're constantly covering it up through a desire to appear okay so that we can kind of get our needs met, in a sense. You know, it's like, and it's such a complex, it's a very complex field, but it's exciting that, I think it's exciting that more light is getting shone on it. You know?
Yes. Yeah. It is exciting. It is exciting, but you know, I'm actually worried where it will go. You know, where it will end up. You know, because it's, I mean, I think, you know, for a lot of people, it's almost become a badge of honor to have been traumatized. You know, and there's this elusive, the person I should have been if I wasn't traumatized, you know. That's the fantasy of who they would have become and who they still could become if only they were given the right sort of psychological medicine, you know, whether it be Peter Levine's work, whatever, you know, some other therapy, or and I'm not sure these therapies deliver, you know. Really?
Well, I guess, you know, it's what we're talking about a little bit before, is like, you know, that you kind of focus on, you kind of focus on the aspects which are tangible, you know, like for me, teaching and leading a lot of bioenergetics, people tend to focus on the posture a lot, that you're putting the body in. Right. And that's just one of three elements, the other being, you know, abdominal breathing, say, and really paying attention to the body. But the natural tendency from the Western mind is to just focus on the posture and how long can I stay in the posture, completely disregarding my breathing or feeling level, you know. Right. So yeah, there's this sense of trying to fix yourself. I mean, I think it's good that all this stuff comes out. I don't think there's any kind of answers. That's also the kind of reality, you know. I saw, I guess, I mean, it's a little bit devil's advocate, but a lot of therapists, in a sense, got input from the 50s, 60s, 70s onwards into child rearing techniques. And, you know, we probably started to create a bit less of a traumatic childhood for kids, in that certain archetypal kind of, you know, character structures started to fade away a little bit or merge a bit more into one another. That's how I kind of saw it happening, you know, as in, you know, from the classic kind of ultra rigid driven kind of the baby boomers, as they used to be called, you know, and these kind of characters dissipated a lot, and people became, in a sense, more heart-centered, but they seem to sort of lack the depth that trauma gave people, in a sense. Not that it's very complex, you know, it's very, very complex.
Very complex. Yeah.
It's not as easy as de-traumatizing society, you know. It would be kind of good if it was, but it's like it creates a lot of very complex questions, you know, and it's not good to feel paralyzed by doubt from all the different possibilities that can happen. But at the same time, it's very, very complex to try and de-traumatize a culture when, in some senses, that culture has only really managed to maintain itself through systematic traumatization. You know, it's I don't know, it's one of these things I kind of think about and sometimes speak about and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I've just had a child at my tender age.
Wow.
And he's nearly 5 months old, you know, and I'm, in some ways, I'm worried about what effect my present has on him, you know, because it has to be both good and bad. It can't be just good, you know. We're composed of light and dark, you know. So, you know, I worry about what having me as a father is doing to my son, you know, just as, you know, my father had an effect on me, you know. Yeah, so I'm, you know, and of course the cultures change and children change and children's interests change, and you just, I'm actually worried for the future of my son, really, you know, thinking about it like that, you know.
I think that's that's very natural, hey?
Yeah, yeah.
Concerned about these things, you know. In a sense, I think I'm grateful I don't have children. I don't know what kind of future. I don't know what kind of future humanity has. Really, it's a bit hard to. It seems to be.
Yeah, I mean, that worries me as well. You know, that worries. I mean, he should see. He should see. He should just see the next millennium. Sorry, the next century. You know, he should be sort of 82 or something at the turn of the century. You know?
Wow.
And what's it going to be like then? You know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting. It's yeah, yeah. It's a fascinating place for the world in a sense, and the West, you know, we have high levels of freedom, and I traveled quite a lot in my 20s and 30s, and the rest of the world seemed to be living, and it's kind of, now that I'm traveling again, it's like most people in the world just live in very simple autocratic regimes, actually. You know, it's like you usually have the extended family system on a kind of street level.
Yeah.
Some kind of governmental level, you have a relatively simple kind of, and quite brutal at times, patriarchal kind of hierarchical structure which governs things. And, you know, for the small percentage of people who live in Western countries, that's a bit more diffuse and you have higher levels of kind of personal freedom. But I mean, yeah, does it really work, Western society? Does it, you know, we know that the extended family system kind of works over time. It's just that it's not very appealing in many ways, you know. It's like, it's complex, you know.
So what do you find not appealing about it?
About the extended family system?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I guess, I mean, it's a little bit tied up with my own stuff and my own being an adopted kid,
right?
Mixed race, brought up but in a white family and stuff like that. But certainly with people from more Latin culture, where it tends to be a bit more predominant than, say, in Northern Europe, you know, it's not easy to escape from the parents. Say, you know, I enjoyed the idea that age 18, I can go to London, get out of Essex and go and just find myself and do my thing. For someone brought up, you know, say 1,000 miles south in southern Italy or southern Spain, that's a great deal harder to do. And the culture's kind of orientated in a different way. And, you know, it's quite common in a lot of areas of Southern Europe for people to still be living with their parents age 32 or something like that.
Yeah, well, it's quite common here now because, you know, because
it's coming, like, yeah, the housing ladder and stuff like that. You mean, like, yeah,
and rental system.
Yeah, it's very, it's I know the housing market's pretty out of control,
Mm.
but to me that's like, it's suboptimal in the way I see things. But then there is a certain resilience in this kind of extended family system, the patriarchal structures above it. There is a certain resilience, and that they do tend to endure over long periods of time. It's just that it would be kind of nice to believe that we could move forwards from that, but I don't know if we can. I don't know. It's
Oh
tricky.
yeah, these are patterns that are deeply ingrained, aren't they? Really, you know, in all cultures, really. The importance of family and extended family,
Mm.
but it's probably in our Western culture, it's more problematic because we're all so dissociated, really.
Well, it's got the negative. Like I said, there's a negative and a positive. Here in Mexico, learning Spanish, something that, I mean, it's a very family-based culture. That's my perception. Certainly compared to the UK, it's hugely much more.
Mm.
But at the same time, it has these negative tendencies. In the Spanish language, they're forever in Mexico putting the diminutive term "ito" at the end of things. You've got the little dog, perrito, gatito. Everything is like "ito." Have a little
Yeah.
this, have a little that. They keep small. They keep small. It's like no one really stands up and has this sense of kind of, here's a really dynamic, full human being. There's a kind of, you stay in this kind of very staying small, staying safe in very close family relationships, but you don't really individuate in the classic kind of Freudian sort of sense.
Right.
It's like, so whereas in the West, you can see very dynamic, and in America, it's a massively, I've not lived in America, but just
Yeah.
interacting and knowing a lot of Americans, there's some incredibly dynamic, amazing human beings that have kind of come out of the culture, and of course a lot of people who just complain and grumble and eat way too much junk food. But I mean, at the same time, it's created, you see the potential in human beings sometimes, particularly in America.
Yeah, but I mean, where did Amazon start? Amazon, it was the most successful business probably in history. It started with a £250,000 loan from his parents. So
Right. Right.
it, it was his parents. It was those family connections that made that, which made him a success.
Mm-hmm.
Really.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I guess how do you get parental support so that it does enable you to individuate, rather than sort of calcify your whole system and end up ill.
Yeah. 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 It's a big topic. It's a big topic, I guess. What do you find the most? Is there an aspect to your work that you find the most kind of personally nourishing?
Is there an aspect that I find personally nourishing? Well, that's an interesting question. I very much, I actually enjoy all of it. Even when it's difficult. Even when there are difficult emotions, I find that sort of quite exciting. Difficult, like if I'm in one-to-one talking therapy, for example, if there's sort of difficult interpersonal stuff going on between us, that's quite exciting. And it's quite difficult as well.
Do you mean when you can kind of feel yourself being triggered emotionally as you're listening or interacting with the client?
Well, it's kind of, I wouldn't say triggered, but I would say sort of feeling some kind of pressure, to do things or fix things, or why aren't you fixing me? And that can make you feel very responsible, and it can be difficult for you to hear, but it's exciting as well.
Yeah.
It's exciting to be faced with that and to be able to talk things like that through, for example. And I guess the other, something else that I really enjoy is holding people. And I often get clients saying to me, "God, you're so good at holding me. I feel so very held." But I'm being held too. You see, I've got my hands on someone, and I'm feeling into their system, and something else is coming in, where we're both held. So I'm enjoying it too. So it's really enjoyable to sit for however, say, 10 minutes, when sort of there's this upwell of streaming or healing energy that's coming through into a person's system. And we're both held in this field of grace. Sometimes I'd like to call it grace. So that's gratifying and enjoyable.
Almost a kind of sort of transpersonal experience.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. I mean, that's for me where the healing happens. It does filter into the body, of course, but it's where the healing happens for me.
Yeah, it is interesting. I guess I've always had this idea, in a sense, that only awareness really heals, especially when it comes to the mind and thinking. And you can change a negative behavior for a better behavior or whatever, but the healing is more having the awareness to see your own mind going down the negative track and not follow it or something, having that sense of choice somewhere.
Right. Yes. I mean, something else that I often see craniosacral clients who've had a lot of therapy, like years of therapy. Or years of psychotherapy, they'll say to me, "I've done a lot of work, and what happens is that almost through however many sessions, all the work they've done crystallizes and comes into their body. It's as though it's been talked about, it's been gone over, it's been scrutinized, it's all been written down. That's the story, but some element has been missing, and it's quite often, I really thought I knew about that, but now I really know about it. I know about it. My body knows. It feels the effects of that. And that's often when they can sort of move on.
Yeah, I mean, it seems sometimes for clients, I had similar experiences when I started to do therapy myself, that they can somewhere intuit what they need next. Some people can kind of intuit it, even if they're not really consciously thinking about it. It's more like, oh, that's interesting. I thought I'd go and do that.
Right.
It does turn out to be something that just really does, as you say, kind of integrate or crystallize other stuff they've done. And it's like a kind of a missing element, but they weren't really consciously thinking about it. It's more like they saw a little flyer or that's interesting. Women in particular, tend to be a bit more.
Yeah. Or they've had another, or what I find is that if they have another issue that they think is separate from all those other issues, and somebody says, "Oh, have you tried craniosacral therapy?" And then they try it, and all these sort of other issues which they had sort of compartmentalized away from that suddenly come in.
Mm, mm, mm.
So it's well, it's often, I think, sort of, you can often not know what you need and avoid sort of have judgments about various therapies, or for me it has been things like what's it called, Reiki, and I've had no experience of Reiki at all, but somehow I'm convinced that it's a load of rubbish, and it's not, obviously,
Yeah.
it's not, and I'd probably get a lot from seeing a Reiki practitioner. I think that, like, when we sort of make up our mind about something, it's often what we need. It's often what we need is the opposite of what we think we need.
Well, of course, that is one of the dominant dynamics of the human psyche, but we tend to create a vision of a world that on some degree serves a need of keeping us away from those forces inside of us, we are most trying to keep away from.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I guess at some point, if you're a therapist or if you've been in the scene for a while, when you can see these heavy judgments about some kind of therapeutic strategy jumping up in your own mind, hopefully a kind of backdraft of thinking that says, well, what's that about?
Exactly.
Why is this? Why is this therapy triggering me so much? Or why is why am I developing so many judgments about things? Yeah.
Yeah, because I would never have dreamed that just somebody just sort of holding me, because I obviously had to have craniosacral therapy myself, and I did for a long time, would have such profound effects, and I can say that it's really amazing therapy. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. It always seems to be around craniosacral and a few other kind of related kind of things. Is it thriving okay, do you think? Do you have a sense of how it's doing sort of in the UK or Europe or something?
Yeah, well, it hasn't, really, the biodynamic craniosacral therapy, it hasn't really been around for that long, and it's sort of continually being honed and developed. And
what is the biodynamic side of it? Is it like an offshoot or something like that, or?
It's, as I was saying before, there's craniosacral therapy, which involves manipulation of tissues and muscles and bones, but the biodynamic doesn't involve any manipulation at all. So you're basically just holding and sensing, and bringing your awareness to things. And I suppose that's been the part that's developed recently, since the 90s, I suppose, and has grown and grown since then. And I think more and more people are hearing about it, and more people are trying it, And of course, for some people, they go, well, what was that? If the guy just held me in various positions, I felt a bit relaxed, but it wasn't worth 50 quid.
Yeah.
And other people go, oh my God, my ancestors are sitting at the bottom of the table, and they literally shake and have quite transformative experiences.
Do you feel like it's something that regardless of commercial aspects, could be adapted into kind of self-help strategies with two people or something like that? Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do know what you mean. Yeah. I don't know. I think I think you can do it on yourself to a certain degree, you know. I mean, you can basically, if you put your hand here, lie down, and your other hand on your sacrum, and just, you know, sense into what's happening, sense into, you know, your spine and your nervous system, you'll get effects, you know. And I often lie down and have my own sort of me craniosacral session.
Right.
It does really calm you.
I guess the arms allow a certain flow of energy out of the head or something like that. I don't know. Or the hand, the physical contact.
Yeah, well, you should try it. I mean, it's about sort of awareness. What's under your fingers? What's, you know, what's behind the skin? You know, what sensations are coming into your fingers? What sensations are coming into your head? You know, where are the sensations moving? You know, attention again.
Well, I notice sometimes I wake up and my hand is touching my head in the middle of the night. And then I had the idea that because, you know, my throat at times can get quite blocked energetically, especially when I'm lying down, maybe my body finds a little way to kind of get out of the head back into the body.
Maybe, yeah.
So I always thought about these techniques. Years ago, they used to even sell a device. You held onto these metal copper, it was copper, and you held onto these little copper kind of like bits of like plumbing pipe, which were then attached to copper pads, which touched the back of your head and the base of your spine. Something like this. There was a company in the States selling them. And that would give these kind of interesting effects where you seem to be just electrically connecting different bits of your body and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I guess that's where I got the idea from, but it was just like, it's kind of finding a way around the sort of classic blocked throat of the Western person, you know?
Yeah. And what's that about being?
I guess on a sort of psychological level, it's like not feeling, hey, it's just okay for me to speak my truth.
Right.
Kind of endure a block. But I mean, certainly working with clients, it's pretty much par for the course that people just seem very blocked in this area.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You know, it's just like that. There is this kind of almost just, it's just generic almost, you know. There's this kind of sense of block of throat, you know.
Yeah. Well, I suppose because here we have to be so perfect, or we have to present the image that we want people to see us, and I suppose this is probably the area that's causing this, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone who's a bit dissociated, like in Reichian, you have the idea of armor rings, lateral armor rings around the forehead. Reich didn't do the forehead, but the eyes, and down to the oral and cervical areas, you know. And then you know, the throat is kind of this kind of big kind of roadblock, so to speak, between. It's like if someone is very mind-body split, it's usually manifest either at the throat or kind of the solar plexus, in a sense. You know, there's a sense of a part of what they used to call it cortical inhibition, I think, like where the higher mind is kind of basically just suppressing the shit out of sexuality and the natural image, kind of there's this flow of energy from the body, like it wants to live and get involved, and the mind is like, well, yes, but I'm going to keep that firmly under control. And the throat for a lot of people becomes just physically the area where this battle kind of takes place between these two forces, you know. So I don't know if that's a sort of part of cranial sacral, in a sense, this need to discharge from the head in some way on a physical level.
I mean, it's very based around the cranium. There are a lot of important dynamics in the skull. I mean, we tend to think of the skull as solid, but it's composed of various different bones that have sort of fused as we've come out of the womb. They fuse together, but they do still, according to craniosacral therapy anyway, they do still move in relation to each other, so I guess what I find when I touch people's head a lot of the time is that they're very constricted, and it's not breathing, so putting your hands on someone's head encourages it to sort of breathe and move, and there's often streamings of release coming up from the body through the neck, and sort of finding release at the cranial suture. So
so in a sense there's like a, when we come out of the womb and the skull tends to sort of harden, does it kind of over harden on a certain level?
No, I don't think so. No, I think the over hardening comes sort of psychologically, really.
Yeah.
When we sort of tense up, we get in our heads and
become hard-headed.
Yeah, hard-headed. Yeah, difficult to crack, as it were.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's nice to chat, Leslie. Thanks.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. I hope you can use some of this.
I usually put it all online. Just people enjoy listening to therapists chat. Some people do anyway, and just see what topics come up and learn little bits of information about things and get a feel for a different therapy or different person.
Right.
That's why I kind of think video is quite good for therapists, really, because if I imagine myself as someone looking for a therapist, just I'm a bit stable in life and I want to get through some of this stuff that I know happened with my dad or my mum or whatever, and you can go on websites and you see these static pictures of a person and their credentials and things, but it doesn't really give you much feel of the person, but if you sort of see them on video, over a while, you take them in much more, and then you get a sense of like, well, I'd be interested to work with that person or that therapy, or no, not that one, it's not for me, that kind of thing. It gives I think video is quite good for therapy generally, because trust is such a big thing, if you're going to unravel your own psyche a bit as a client, you want to feel like you have some kind of connection, or you can relate to the person that you're going to possibly do that with.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, it's quite often people say, well, I chose you because you have a kind face, with a static picture. But I kind of wasn't aiming. I just, but it's interesting that those first impressions, are you kind? I think that's what people are looking for. Will you accept me? Are you kind? That's what some people are looking for. Some people.
Sure. I used to tend, when I was doing a lot of group therapy, running groups, more the opposite. It's sort of like, I know this group's going to be really confrontational, intense, but I kind of need it,
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I get kind of the opposite.
And that's another wonderful area of therapy is group work. I think group work is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. Well, it'll be nice when we can do it again, really. It's pretty much the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Understandably, but it'll be cool when we can run workshops again. That would be have that job back. Anyway, so it's lovely. Thank you very much for coming on this podcast, Leslie. And it's great to meet you and just to have this free-form chat. So thanks very much.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you too, and thanks for having me.